So next week, I'm releasing a video all about how to ensure that you make a full-time living as a freelancer and what the top mistakes are that freelancers make that prevent them from actually making a full-time income. And one of the things I shared was that you need to avoid taking low-paying clients. That's like the most important part of your freelance journey is from the get-go. Even if you're new, you want to avoid taking low-paying clients. And I understand that that's a lot easier said than done when you're in the beginning stages and you just want to get that work under your belt and you're trying to build a portfolio. However, it's really important that you start your freelance career off on the right foot by out the gate charging your full worth and not working for low-paying clients. And I want to explain how I did this because what I'm going to talk about today is your finances and why that puts you in a mindset to not take low-paying clients. Because I can tell you until the cows come home to raise your rates and to go to AWAI and download the free pricing guide that I'm always talking about to make sure that you have your rates set correctly for industry standard pricing. But if you are desperate, if you feel like you need money now, if you are just very anxious to kind of get this rolling, you are putting yourself at a disadvantage. Whereas if you go into this cool, calm, and collected, knowing that you can say no to certain clients, knowing that if you don't get that client, you can actually still, pay your rent and pay your bills and everything else, it is such a different mindset, and this is going to become such a joyful career for you. But I want to explain how you get there in the financial sense, because not long ago, I was in a totally opposite situation where I was in student debt. I had no control over my finances and my spending. I was living in the most expensive city, which was New York, and I didn't know where my money was going. I had no idea how to handle my finances. I was racking up credit card debt. I was making really dumb decisions. I would say my actual probably dumbest choice was that I was kind of trying this career stint as an ESL instructor, and I was getting paid jack in this job because that's just how ESL instructing is. It's a low-paying job. And I decided that I was going to take a trip with my friends to Thailand because I had never left the country. And I was like 26 or something. And I'm like, well, everyone else has left the country. I've never been out of the country. I'm not from a family that took vacations. So I'm like, I need to experience this. So literally with no money, I just charged a trip to Thailand so I could have that experience. So just really irresponsible. And it wasn't until I got on the right path by actually getting out of my student loan debt and seeing where my finances were actually, seeing where my money was going each month, that I got, it built up very incrementally. First, it started by paying off the student loan. I had about I'm going to say $19,000 to pay off, which was extremely hard because I wasn't making a lot of money at the time. So I got out of the student debt. Then I started tracking my expenses and seeing where that stuff was going. And then I started saving, and then I started investing. And this was, over a span of a couple of years that I was able to build these skills. So I want to share the tools and the resources that I used to actually gain this knowledge, because I was very intimidated by this stuff. And actually, I have a learning disability with math and numbers. I have always struggled with that. I was always very high in reading and writing, obviously. But with math, it was just always a constant struggle. I was in the small classes in high school. I barely skated by in terms of qualifying to get into college because those scores were just so low. So because finances dealt with numbers, I really figured I am never going to be able to figure this out. This is for numbers people and not for me. And when I discovered certain personalities and influencers like Dave Ramsey, who were just saying, financial advice in such an accessible and interesting way. If you listen to Dave Ramsey, it sounds like he's yelling at you. He's like the father. He's like the old Southern father you never had that's yelling at you and giving you common sense advice. And it's very entertaining. So I want to share that with you, that the first book I read that allowed me to get out of debt and pay off my $20,000 student loan was The Total Money Makeover by Dave Ramsey. And I really embodied his entire ethos on getting really intense and paying off debt like your life depends on it, and putting everything else aside, and not going out to eat at restaurants and not going on vacations until you get this figured out. He's really no nonsense, and he's really, he's the real deal when it comes to this stuff. So I definitely recommend The Total Money Makeover by Dave Ramsey. People like Dave Ramsey and other financial influencers, when they write books, one of the books that they always recommend is a book called The Millionaire Next Door. The author's last name is Stanley. Let's see, it's Thomas J. Stanley. So I actually, other than The Total Money Makeover, a good starting point is The Millionaire Next Door by Morgan J. Stanley. And why I recommend, reading this book is because it is the largest survey on millionaires in the United States and what their habits actually are. And this book will be so mind-blowing to you, and really open up your mind to see what the spending habits and the lifestyles of actual millionaires are, because we're living in an Instagram world right now where everybody is flexing all of this fake and rented and leased stuff that they do not own, that they cannot afford. And people are sitting there scratching their head saying, why can't I get there? And how did that person do that? And seriously, I get text messages from my friends and they're like, how does so-and-so do that? They're traveling the world. I can't even afford this and that. It's like, well, because they are racking up debt, which makes you a slave, a literal slave, because you owe money to somebody. You don't own that. And mind you, there is good debt, so okay, there's nuance with certain things, but racking up credit card debt to buy designer stuff is not the same as investing in an asset like real estate or something like that. So don't get me wrong and say oh, okay, all debt is horrible. That's not true. Yes, there's nuance to this, but for the most part, the people you see on Instagram flexing are not investing in actual assets and have a long-term financial strategy. It's just a need for attention and wanting to flex on people. And back to what I was saying about this book actually looks at the real habits of real millionaires, people who with a certain net worth. And what they found in this study was that these people were living very modest, practical, down-to-earth lifestyles. They were not driving around new cars. They were buying used cars. They were wearing cheap suits, I think one of the thing was. So, this is really about understanding what true wealth looks like versus the images that we're constantly bombarded with. So that's The Millionaire Next Door. Now, once I got out of the student loan debt, the next thing I did was trying to get my spending and my finances in order, and bill paying was a big part of that, because I would pay bills some month and then be late on other stuff. And this book right here, I know it's going to be backwards, guys, so I'm going to put the titles in the captions and stuff like that, but it is I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Ramit Sethi. And he basically talks about automating all of your payments each month, right? So I don't need to remember to pay anything because it automatically gets paid on time. You automate all of your payments. And one of the things that I got from this book is the concept of investing in what you are really, really passionate about and things you really love versus just wasting money on everything. Because, and I'll just read his quote because this is actually going to be so much better than what I can articulate. Frugality isn't about cutting your spending on everything. That approach wouldn't last 2 days. Frugality, quite simply, is about choosing the things you love enough to spend extravagantly on, and then cutting costs mercilessly on the things you don't love. So for me, I definitely spend a lot on the things that mean a lot to me in terms of my lifestyle. So the gym and fitness and paying for that ridiculously expensive bike behind me, where a lot of people are like, are you kidding me? You actually bought one of those? Well, yeah, because I care about that more than wearing a designer shirt and designer shoes. I'll go to Marshall's and TJ Maxx, and I actually don't care to eat at restaurants, but I will spend a lot on that bike because it's going to motivate me to work out. So it's not a matter of being this like total cheap tightwad person. It's about investing in the things you actually really like. So he's really good with that, because he's like, stop listening to people who tell you to stop buying $5 lattes per day. That's not good financial advice. And I kind of do ascribe to that. And then once I kind of got my finances locked in and was actually saving money, which this is now getting to the point where, okay, this is what enabled me to actually do freelancing full time, was because I had money saved. And having money saved did two things for me. It allowed me to quit my job and it allowed me to become a freelancer full time, because at my job, my full-time 9-to-5 sales job that I left to become a freelancer, I was in a very toxic situation. I had my back up against the wall because on the one hand, I was dealing with all of these inappropriate interactions with clients. And on the other hand, I still had to go in and talk to those clients and hold meetings with them, because my income was based on them, and my income was based on managing relationships for the company that I was working for. So what I hated about the 9-to-5 life is really just the fact that you are not free. You're not free. One of the things that happened right before I quit my job was that a customer was disrespecting me, and I called them up and I bitched them out. And the customer wound up calling my boss and was like, I have never had someone speak to me like this. But, I just gave him a piece of my mind because I had to stand up for myself. That you cannot do when you work for someone else. Now I represented that company in a bad light. I was not in control of my own ability to stand up for myself. So now as a freelancer, if I don't like something that's happening with a client, I end the relationship, and it's no harm, no foul, and we walk away, and that's it. So it's like, for me, that's why it's so worth it to have autonomy and control, and for people to not be able to tell me what I can do. I have options, I have choices. And with that specific job where I was in a very toxic situation, I had saved enough money of my salary that I was getting from them that I knew that I could walk away and not be completely screwed financially. I could actually live for a few months, and I could quit, and I could just figure it out for a while. Then when it came to freelancing, again, I was in that situation where I did have people who are like, yeah, you can write for us, but it's only for this certain amount of money. And I was able to say no. I was waiting for a great opportunity to come, because I knew that if I didn't get that client, I could actually sustain myself for a few months, because I had my emergency savings that I had worked really hard to build. So that's really important. And that's kind of what brings me here, is The Simple Path to Wealth by J.L. Collins. This is a book on investing, and this is so important, because when you become a full-time freelancer, you are not going to have your typical 401k that's offered by a company. You're going to need to open your own investment accounts for your retirement. So I opened my Roth IRA, which I highly recommend you open a Roth IRA to start saving for retirement. And then he can kind of advise you on what investments to make within your retirement account, so that you're, setting yourself up for the future, because you don't want to work forever. And the two things that I really took from this book were his advice about avoiding financial advisors. So too many have only their own interests at heart. By the time you know enough to pick a good one, you know enough to handle your finances yourself. It's your money, and no one will care for it better than you. So you have to understand that hiring a financial advisor works for commission, and there are certain advisors that have something called fiduciary responsibility or accountability or whatever it's called. So I'm not saying that everyone's bad. I'm just saying that like he said, no one's going to handle your finances the way you are and care for them the way you will. And then the second thing he said is that the stock market is a powerful wealth building tool and you should be investing in it, but realize that the market and the value of your shares will sometimes drop dramatically. And this is absolutely normal and to be expected. When it happens, ignore the drops and buy more shares. There's going to be a lot of people screaming at you to sell, sell, sell. But nobody can predict when these drops will happen. Even the media is filled with those who claim they can, but they're delusional and they're trying to sell you something. Ignore them. So what he's really speaking to, if I could just break it down, is that when you have a long-term investment strategy, the way I do with my Roth IRA, that's the beauty of a Roth, is that it grows untaxed income. It's basically, he's saying that, yeah, the market is going to go up and down and it's going to be really scary, but you don't plan on taking this out until you're much, much older and you actually need to live off those finances. So don't freak out and sell all of your shares, because quite honestly, I don't even look at my investments because I know that I'm not going to tap into that for so long. So I'm going to let the market do what it does and just cash out, when it's actually time for retirement. So I'll end it there, but I wanted to share those books with you because they helped me have something that some people call FU money, which is the ability when you don't like something that's going on, you can make your exit. That's what my entire freelance ethos is stop relying on employers, because the minute they tell you need to do something that you don't want to do, you don't really have a choice. You can either follow their instructions or leave. And you can't leave as easy if you are desperate to pay your bills and if you are in debt and you have all of these liabilities and you're living a lifestyle that's just not you need to live beneath your means, especially when you're saving and investing and trying to get your finances right. So the number one, it might sound so simple when I say don't take low paying clients. People are saying to themselves, well, easy for you to say, I need a client right now. Don't put yourself in the position to need a client. Put yourself in a position to be choosy, to be picky, to be selective. And that is having a savings account, a cushion of money that will sustain you. So I hope this helped. And go to paidcopywriter.com. I'm going to share resources there as well. Thanks, guys.